The void was a silent black ocean, and the Valerian fleet cut through it like a fleet of polished knives. For them, silence was not peace, it was control. Aboard the flagship, Spear of Purity, the bridge was a sterile sanctuary of light and metal. No voice was ever raised. Every movement was precise. High Justicar Kyle stood like a statue at its heart, his silver robes pooling around his feet. His perfect face was a mask of contempt as he stared at the image on the main screen. Tartarus 7, the name itself sounded dirty. It was a festering wound in the darkness. A jagged rock scarred by mining claws, surrounded by clumsy, brutish ships that leaked radiation and noise. Crude symbols, painted in offensively bright colors, marred their hulls. Even from this distance, KL could almost feel the system's chaotic pulse, a thrum of uncontrolled engines and raw, undisciplined life. It made his jaw tighten. Analysis confirms a low-tier human industrial outpost, High Justicar, a subordinate reported, his voice a carefully controlled whisper. Shall we broadcast a warning of purification? Kale made a small, dismissive gesture with his hand. One does not warn bacteria before sterilizing a surface, he said, his voice laced with a cold disgust. Erase this filth. Yes, High Justicar. The command flowed through the fleet. From 200 perfect ships, lances of cold fire erupted. They were not weapons of war, they were instruments of cleansing. Silent scalpels of light designed to cut away imperfection. They sliced through the human station, and the structure of rock and steel did not explode. It was unwritten from existence. They touched the ugly mining ships, and the vessels dissolved into brief, brilliant novas of plasma. Then the lances focused on the asteroid. Under their combined energy, the very rock screamed, cracking and boiling away into a cloud of atoms. The process was swift, efficient, and utterly pitiless. Kale watched until the last trace of Tartarus 7 was gone. A stain had been removed from the canvas of his galaxy. He felt a sliver of satisfaction, the quiet pride of a gardener who had just pulled a stubborn weed. Onward, he said, turning his back on the empty space. The incident was already beneath his notice. Alarms shrieked, a sound of pure mechanical panic. On the bridge of the grid, the world was fire, noise, and pain. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The deck plating shuddered violently, a deep groan of tortured metal. The air reeked of ozone and scorched wiring, thick with the coppery taste of blood. Old man Jorik, captain of this rust bucket, dragged himself across the floor. His ribs were broken, and a deep gash ran across his forehead, blinding him in one eye. The grid had only survived the initial flash by a fluke of positioning. It was a fluke that had bought them mere minutes. Hull breach! Life support critical! A voice choked out from the smoke. The reactor's going to blow! Another screamed. Jorik ignored them. His eyes were locked on the forward view screen, which was still playing the sensor logs of the last few minutes. He saw the beautiful, cruel ships. He saw the silent white fire. He saw his world, his crew, his people, being scoured from existence like dirt. A furnace of pure primal rage ignited in his gut, burning hotter than his ship's dying reactor. He clawed his way to the communications console. His ship was a coffin. He was a dead man, but he would not die quietly. He would make sure their ghosts would haunt the galaxy. Hold this piece of crap together, he roared, his voice cracking. His fingers, more claws than flesh now, stabbed at the console. He bypassed every official protocol, every safety lock, and ripped the raw data from the ship's memory, the video, the audio, the screams. He welded it all together into a single poisoned spear of information. He leaned into the comms microphone, the metal cold against his split lip. Tartarus remembers, he growled, the words dredged up from the deepest part of his soul. His voice was a promise of violence, a tribal declaration of war. He roared the words again, each one torn from his throat, a final ragged curse spat into the uncaring dark. We demand payment. With the last of his strength, he slammed his fist on the broadcast command. The message, a digital shriek of pure hate, was unleashed on a repeating loop, designed to infect every open channel it touched. As the signal flared out into the void, the bridge of the grit finally fell into darkness and silence. Jorik's body slumped forward, but his will, forged into a weapon, was now traveling at the speed of light. In a crowded bar on the lawless station of Port Nowhere, the easy laughter choked in throats as the video of the massacre appeared on the main screen. A heavy, dangerous silence fell over the room of killers and thieves. On the opulent bridge of a corporate superfreighter, the CEO watched Yorick's final message. His manicured nails dug into the expensive synth leather of his command chair, leaving deep grooves. And on a renegade warship, a mercenary with a scarred face looked up from his weapons bench. He listened to the raw promise in Yorick's roar, and a slow, predatory grin spread across his lips, the look of a wolf that has just caught the scent of blood, the blood that had been sent. The swarm was about to awaken. Kalen Riker stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Breaker. The bridge was not clean or new. It was old and damaged, with scorch marks on the walls from past fights. Riker was a large, quiet man. His face had many old scars. He watched the video message on the main screen. The message was from the captain of the Grit. It showed the destruction of the mining station at Tartarus 7. It showed the beautiful Valerian ships destroying everything with white light. The message ended with the dying captain's angry voice repeating, "We demand payment." Riker's crew stood behind him. They were miners and engineers, not soldiers. They watched the video without saying a word. Their faces were grim, and their eyes were full of cold anger. Maeve, the chief engineer, spoke first. Her voice was rough. "Captain," she said, "what are we going to do?" Riker looked at the faces of his crew. He saw their anger. It was the same anger he felt. He turned back to the screen. "Maeve, prepare the engines," Riker said in a low, calm voice. "We are going." A loud cheer came from the crew. They were ready. The giant ship began to hum as its powerful engines started up. The Breaker was not a warship. It was a giant industrial ship built to break asteroids into small pieces. But today it would hunt. Far away, 3 Valerian ships were patrolling near the destroyed Tartarus 7 system. Their commander was a young, arrogant officer named Theron. His job was to make sure the destruction of Tartarus 7 was complete. He did not expect to find anything. Suddenly, a large object appeared on his sensors. It was a single, ugly ship, and it was moving fast. "What is that?" Theron asked, annoyed that something had survived. "It is a human ship, Justicar," an officer reported. "An industrial ship. A heavy asteroid-cracker. It has some simple weapons." Theron almost laughed. "A single mining ship." It was pathetic. "Contact them," he ordered. "Order them to stop their ship and surrender. We will take them for study." The comms officer tried to send a message. "They are not responding, Justicar." Theron's face grew cold. "Then open fire," he commanded. "Damage their engines. Do not destroy the ship." The 3 Valerian cruisers fired their blue energy beams. The beams were fast and accurate. They shot across space towards the Breaker. On the Breaker's bridge, alarms rang out. "Incoming fire!" someone shouted. "Raise the shields," Riker ordered. The ship's energy shields turned on, crackling with power. The Valerian beams hit the shields hard. The whole ship shook from the impact. "Shields are holding," Maeve yelled. Riker allowed a small, grim smile. "Good," he said. He spoke into the ship's microphone. "Maeve, remember that big rock we picked up? The iron one? Get it ready. Load it into our main weapon, the mass driver." The Breaker's main weapon was not a normal gun. It was a giant magnetic launcher designed to throw huge rocks at asteroids to break them apart. The entire ship began to hum and shake as the massive weapon charged with power. On the Valerian bridge, Theron watched the human ship. It was clumsy and slow. He thought it was an easy target. Then he saw something strange. A large hatch on the front of the human ship was opening. "What are they doing?" Theron wondered. Something huge and dark came out of the hatch. It was a giant rock, as big as a small building. It was flying directly at them, very fast. "Turn the ship! Move!" Theron screamed in panic. But it was too late. The giant rock was not a missile. It was just a simple, heavy piece of iron. The Valerian ship's shields were designed to stop energy, not solid objects with that much mass. The rock smashed straight through the middle of the lead Valerian ship. The beautiful ship broke in half. There was no large explosion, just the terrible sight of a perfect vessel being torn apart by a simple rock. A wild cheer erupted on the bridge of the Breaker. Riker watched the enemy ship break apart on his screen. He simply nodded. Target the other two, he said calmly. The news of what the Breaker did spread quickly through the human channels. A single mining ship had destroyed a Valerian warship. The story gave people hope and courage. Soon, other human ships began to answer the call. It was a strange fleet. There were big cargo ships with guns welded to their sides. There were old pirate ships and giant construction platforms. They were not an army. They were an angry swarm. High Justicar KL saw the reports on his flagship. He watched the images of the clumsy human ships gathering. He felt nothing but disgust. They are like insects, he said to his officers. His voice was full of hate. They got lucky once, and now they think they are strong. We will show them what true power is. Prepare the Grand Fleet. I will crush this rebellion myself. Kale stared out at the stars. He was sure of his victory. He did not understand that he was not fighting an army. He was fighting a species that had nothing left to lose. The blood debt was a promise, and all of humanity was coming to collect. The Serpent's Maw Nebulum was a thick cloud of swirling jets and dust. It was a place where sensors became unreliable and long-range targeting was difficult. It was the perfect place for a fight. The Valerian fleet entered the nebula first. 200 ships, flying in a perfect V formation. They looked like a single shining spearhead, ready to pierce the heart of the human rebellion. On the bridge of the flagship, Spear of Purity, High Justicar Kael watched his display screen with cold confidence. He saw the human fleet waiting for them. It was not a fleet. It was a disorganized cloud of ugly ships, scattered without any logic. They are a mob, not an army, Kael said to his officers. Their chaos will be their undoing. He gave the order. Advance, erase them! The Valerian spear shot forward. Their weapons fired in perfect unison. Lances of blue energy crossed the void and struck the human fleet. 5 human ships, mostly small freighters, exploded instantly. They never stood a chance. The Valerian attack was precise, disciplined, and deadly. On the bridge of the Breaker, Riker watched the red icons on his screen blink out. He watched his people die. He knew they could not win a direct fight. They were not soldiers. They were brawlers. They had to make this a brawl. He opened a channel to all the human ships. His voice was a low growl that cut through the panic. All ships, this is Riker. Do not fly straight. Do not fight in lines. Get in close, break their formations. Make them chase you. Go! The human fleet exploded into motion. It was pure chaos. They did not attack from the front. Small groups of fast pirate ships dove under the Valerian formation, firing at their engines from below. Large cargo haulers turned sideways, using their massive bodies as shields for smaller ships. A Valerian captain on a cruiser tried to target a human ship. Suddenly, his ship shook violently. Report! He yelled. Sir, 2 small ships are attacking our rear engines. Our turrets cannot aim at them. The captain stared in disbelief. This was not warfare. This was madness. His perfect ship was being swarmed by angry insects. Riker pushed the Breaker straight into the enemy's center. He used his giant ship like a moving wall of steel. He drew the fire of the biggest Valerian ships. His shields flared and buckled, the ship groaning under the impacts, but he held his position. While the enemy was focused on him, the rest of the human swarm descended on them from all sides. The perfect Valerian spearhead began to crack. Their formations broke apart as each ship was forced to deal with threats from multiple directions. The battle was no longer a clean, orderly execution. It had become a messy, close-range dogfight. A young pilot named Leo was the captain of a small, fast ship called the Iron Wolf. He and his crew had just destroyed a Valerian patrol ship, but a larger cruiser had hit them hard. His ship was dying. Alarms blared as fire filled his cockpit. A message appeared on his screen. It was from the Valerian cruiser. It was a standard text message. Your vessel is disabled. Surrender now and your end will be swift. Leo looked around his bridge. His friends were dead. The air was turning toxic. He felt a hot surge of pure hate. He would not be their prisoner. He would not be their data point. He grabbed his controls. The ship still had some engine power. He aimed the nose of his dying vessel directly at the command bridge of the Valerian cruiser. He opened his comms channel to the entire battlefield. His voice, young and full of rage, roared out for everyone to hear. For the pack, for Tartarus! The Valerian captain on the cruiser saw the small human ship turn towards him. He watched it accelerate. His eyes widened in disbelief. This was not logical. It was suicide. The Iron Wolf slammed into the cruiser's command bridge. The explosion was small but brutally effective. The cruiser's bridge was vaporized. The large warship went dead in space, its lights flickering out, its command structure instantly gone. A wave of shock passed through the Valerian fleet. They had seen ships be destroyed, but they had never seen a captain turn his own death into a weapon. They had never faced an enemy that chose to die with such savage purpose. On the Spear of Purity, KL watched the cruiser icon go dark. He watched the chaos spread through his fleet. His perfect lines were gone, replaced by a swirling mess of individual fights. For the first time, a flicker of angry confusion crossed his face. He could not predict this enemy. He could not control them. This battle was no longer pure. It was dirty. He hated it. Retreat, KL commanded, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. All ships, retreat and regroup. The Valerian fleet turned and fled from the nebula. On the bridge of the Breaker, the human crew erupted in cheers. They had won. They had faced the might of the Valerian fleet and made them run. But Riker was silent. He looked at the display screen. Dozens of friendly red icons were gone. The victory had cost them dearly. They had won this fight by being unpredictable and ferocious. But they were bleeding. They could not win a war this way. The cheering around him slowly died down as the crew saw the cost of their victory. They had survived. But the war was far from over. And they knew their enemy would be back, with more ships and more fury than ever before. They needed a new plan, a better plan, or their victory today would mean nothing tomorrow. The news from the human spy network was bad. The Valerians were gathering their grand fleet, over 1,000 warships all moving towards a single target, a huge human space station called the Forge. The Forge was not a military base. It was a home for millions of people, a center for trade and industry. If it fell, the heart of humanity would be broken. On the bridge of the Breaker, the human leaders held a council of war. Riker, Maeve, and the captains of the other clans stared at the tactical map. The map showed a giant red arrow of Valerian ships pointing at the small blue dot of the Forge. The human fleet had less than 200 ships left, and many were damaged from the last battle. "We can't stop them," a clan captain said, his voice heavy. "They will fly right through us and burn the Forge to ashes." The other captains were silent. They knew he was right. They could not win a fair fight. Riker did not look at the fleet formations. He looked at a different map on a side screen. It was a map of industrial travel routes. He pointed a scarred finger at a small, bright star deep in Valerian territory. "Then we won't fight fair," he said. "We won't fight their fleet at all. We will fight their world." The other captains looked at him in confusion. Maeve understood first. Her eyes widened. "Ethelberg," she whispered. "The Valerian homeworld." Riker explained the plan. It was simple. It was brutal. It was insane. The main human fleet would go to the Forge. They would fight the Valerian Grand Fleet. Their job was not to win. Their job was to die fighting, to create a wall of fire and steel, and to buy time. While they fought and died, a small group of ships, led by the Breaker, would do something else. They would use their powerful industrial FTL drives to jump to Ethelberg. They would carry a special cargo, a dozen massive iron-rich asteroids. They would not fire missiles. They would simply drop the rocks on the planet. A decapitation strike. "It's a suicide mission," another captain said. "They killed our people on Tartarus," Riker answered, his voice cold as space. "They are coming to kill millions more on the Forge. They started this. We will end it." There were no more arguments. Every captain in the room nodded. They knew the price, and they were willing to pay it. The battle at the Forge was a nightmare. The human fleet, outnumbered 5-1, threw themselves at the incoming Valerian armada. They fought with the fury of cornered animals. Their ships exploded, creating temporary shields of wreckage for the ships behind them. They knew they were buying time with their lives, and they sold their lives dearly. Meanwhile, light years away, the Breaker and 5 other giant industrial ships dropped out of their violent FTL jump. Below them spun the planet Ethelberg. It was beautiful. A perfect world of white cities, green parks, and blue oceans. It was the heart of the Valerian Empire, and it was heavily defended. Planetary cannons and defense platforms immediately opened fire on them. "This is it," Riker yelled. "Do your jobs." The other industrial ships moved. One ship, the Quarry, flew directly into the path of the defense lasers, its hull melting as it shielded the breaker. Before it was destroyed, it fired its cargo of smaller asteroids which spread out and confused the enemy sensors. Another ship, the Goliath, pushed its engines to overload. It exploded in a massive flash of energy, temporarily blinding the entire defense network. The path was open, but only for a moment, and only the breaker was left. Riker pushed his ship forward, flying through the fire and debris. The breaker was hit again and again. Alarms screamed across the bridge. "Heavy damage! Engines are failing!" Maeve shouted over the noise. "The main launcher is hit! The targeting computer is gone, Captain!" Riker looked at the view screen. He could see the planet growing larger. He could see the tallest, whitest tower in the capital city. It was the command citadel of High Justicar Kyle. A deep gash was bleeding on his side, but he barely felt it. "I don't need a computer," he growled. He shoved his wounded navigator aside and grabbed the manual controls for the mass driver himself. The ship shook around him, threatening to break apart. He used his eyes. He used his hands. He used his lifetime of experience as a miner who knew how to break rocks. On Ethelberg, High Justicar Kale watched the battle at the forge on his main screen. His fleet was winning. The human resistance was pathetic, though surprisingly fierce. He was enjoying their slow destruction. "High Justicar," an aide said nervously. "We have multiple unidentified objects entering the upper atmosphere. They seem to be asteroids." Kale waved a hand dismissively, not looking away from his victory screen. "Our defense grid will handle any stray meteors. Do not bother me with trivialities." Back on the breaker, Riker had the final asteroid locked in. The largest one. The planet killer. The ship around him was screaming its death cry. He looked one last time at the white tower on the screen. He leaned into the microphone. His voice was calm. Payment delivered. He slammed his fist on the launch button. The giant rock shot from the belly of his ship. At the same moment, the breaker's reactor finally gave way. The giant ship was consumed in a silent, brilliant ball of fire. On Ethelberg, KO finally turned from his screen, annoyed by his aide's continued warnings. He looked out the grand window of his citadel. The sky was on fire. Dozens of burning streaks were falling from the heavens. The ground began to shake. He looked up. His perfect, logical mind could not process what he was seeing. A new dark star was growing in the sky above him. It was not a star. It was a mountain of burning iron, falling directly towards his perfect tower. For the first time in his life, High Justicar Kale felt terror. His perfect world was about to be shattered by a crude, simple rock. The ultimate insult. His face, a mask of pure horror, was the last thing to exist before the world turned to white fire and dust. The effect of planetfall was not immediate, but it was absolute. At the battle for the Forge, the great Valerian armada suddenly faltered. Their perfect, synchronized attacks became confused. Their formations wavered. On thousands of Valerian bridges, the same message flashed across every screen. Connection to high command lost. Awaiting orders, but no orders came. On the battered human ships, the exhausted crews watched in disbelief. The relentless enemy assault was slowing down. Then the news came, spreading like a ghost through the comms channels. It was a single raw data packet from a long-range scout probe. It showed a grainy image of a planet shrouded in a thick black cloud of dust. The message was short. Ethelberg is gone. Riker's mission was a success. Chaos consumed the Valerian fleet. Without the rigid central command of High Justicar Kyle, the disciplined army became a panicked mob. Some ships, commanded by lesser officers, tried to continue the fight. Others fought each other for control. Many simply turned and fled, jumping to FTL without direction. The great spear of the Valerian Empire had been shattered, not by force, but by the removal of the mind that guided it. The battle was over. The human fleet, or what was left of it, had won. The silence after the battle was heavier than any explosion. The space around the forge was a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. Of the nearly 200 human ships that had made a stand, Less than 50 remained, and all were heavily damaged. On the bridge of her crippled engineering vessel, Maeve looked at the casualty reports. The list of names scrolled endlessly on the screen. She saw the name of the young pilot, Leo. She saw the names of all the other captains who had fought and died. And at the top of the list, marked with honor, was Kalen Reck Riker. He was a legend now. A ghost. The man who had answered the blood debt. The man who had thrown a mountain at a god. The humans had survived, but they had paid for that survival with the souls of their best. They had earned their future with blood and fire. 1 year later, the galaxy was a different place. The Valerian Empire was a memory. Without a central leader, it had fractured into a dozen smaller, warring states. They were too busy fighting each other to be a threat to anyone else. The other alien races now looked towards human territory with a new emotion. It was not friendship. It was a deep and profound fear. The forge was being rebuilt. It was larger now, uglier and more heavily armed than ever before. It was no longer just a trading hub. It was a fortress, a symbol of humanity's unbreakable will. A new ship was being completed in its main dock. It was the UES Breaker 2. It was larger and more powerful than the original, but it had the same ugly, functional design. It was not a ship built for beauty. It was a ship built to send a message. Its new captain, Marcus Thorne, stood on the bridge. He had served as Riker's first officer. He was younger than Riker, but his eyes held the same cold, quiet intensity. A new scar ran down the side of his face, a souvenir from the battle at the forge. An alien ambassador stood nervously before him. The ambassador was from a neutral trading species that now wanted a formal treaty with humanity. Captain Thorne, the ambassador began, his voice trembling slightly, my people, and indeed the rest of the Galactic Council, wish to understand, what does humanity want now? Is it conquest? Is it revenge for what the Valerians did? Thorne was silent for a long moment. He looked up past the ambassador, out the main view screen at the star-dusted darkness of space. He had seen enough war to last 1,000 lifetimes. But he had also seen what happened when his people were perceived as weak. He finally turned his cold, clear eyes to the trembling alien. We want to be left alone, he said, his voice low and steady. He took a step closer and the ambassador flinched. And Thorne finished, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a promise as hard as diamond. We want to be paid what we are owed. And so the Valerian Empire has fallen under the weight of a debt that money couldn't pay. But the biggest question still remains. What does humanity want now? Our journey in this universe is far from over. Will the other races bow down in fear, or will a new threat rise from the ashes of an old enemy? I'd love to hear your theories down in the comments. To explore the next stories in this universe together, give this video a like to fuel up our fleet. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any announcements for upcoming missions. Every single subscription is a new ship joining the swarm. Thanks for being part of the journey. And welcome aboard.